Okay, so hello everyone again. This is Miss Hang Moon from Business Communication subject, and let's start our lecture today. So, should you have any problems hearing me or any problem during the lecture, please comment in the chat box so I can know it. Uh, okay, so to start the lecture today, first I want to remind you about the three parts of business communication class that we talked about in the previous lecture. So in the last lecture, we talked about three parts of business communication subject. The first one is written communication. The second one is spoken communication, and the third one is employment communication. And in today's lecture, we are going to start with the first lecture of written communication, in which we learn about the three basic steps for writing. And in the coming lectures, we will cover different types of messages, including positive, negative, and persuasive messages. So this lecture is especially important because it will provide you with all the uh, basic process of how to draft a writing and how to compose the message, and then how to complete the message in the best way. So hopefully we will have a useful lecture together. So this is the first time I run online lectures, and it is a bit weird to not hearing any of you and just me speaking along the way. So if you have any questions or anything that you want me to stop and explain more, you can comment in the chat box, and I will stop and explain more about that. Okay, so today's lecture is about three-step writing process, and if you have a look at the textbook, it will uh, be related to three chapters, which is chapter 4, 5, and 6. So it is a really big topic that we need to finish today, and hopefully we will be able to finish it. So the three, before we come to the three step in writing, let's have a look first at a very important model that we need to know in this subject, which is the basic communication process. So as a matter of fact, this is the content of last lecture, but we didn't have a lot of time to talk about it. So I will explain it again a little bit today. So in this basic communication process, everything would starts with the sender having an idea. So last time we talked about the sender may have one idea, maybe a boy having the idea that he likes a girl in the class, and he wants to send or to convey the message to the receiver, which is the girl, right? But actually having an idea, people may have the same idea, but the way they encode the idea into a message may be very different. So for a simple and frank boy, he may encode the idea of liking a girl into exactly the same message, that he comes to the girl and say, I like you. But for another boy, he may encode the idea into a totally different message. uh, for example, like he may tease the girl, or tell her friends, but not directly the girl. So after having an idea and encoding the idea into a message, the sender will produce that message in a medium, maybe a oral face-to-face message or an email, and then transmit the message through a channel, maybe in a face-to-face conversation or via the computer, via the internet. When the audience receives the message, the audience will also decode the message. And the way the audience decode the message may be very different from the original idea from the sender. Okay, so then the audience may want to respond to the message and provide some feedback to the sender. So this basic communication process is the foundation of many things that we will learn during the semester. Uh, After understanding about the basic communication process, we will have a look at the 3 steps, including in the writing process. So in the writing process here, we will have 3 main steps. The first one is planning, the second one is writing, and the third one is completing. So amongst these 3 steps, which do you think is the most important? Which do you think that we should spend the most time on? Is it planning? Is it writing? Or is it completing? Or should the time be equally divided among the 3 steps, like 1/3 of the time for the planning part, 1/3 for writing, and 1/3 for completing? What do you think? Which one should be the most important one? Okay, so yeah, okay, thank you, Tuấn Anh, for your comment. Tuấn Anh said that most of the time should be in planning. So yeah, and Hiền and Trâm Anh, right, also share the same idea. Okay, so uh, actually all your answers are correct. So all of us know the saying like when we fail to plan, we plan to fail, right? And planning should take up the biggest part of your time. Actually, as the textbook stated, planning should account for 50% of the whole time for the writing, and then 25% of the time for writing, and then another 25% for completing. Okay, so thank you everyone for contributing your answers. Again, planning is the most important part, and we also spend a lot of time in this lecture to talk about how to plan your writing. Okay, so the first step in planning is to analyze the situation. In order to analyze the situation, you will first define your purpose. What is your purpose? Okay, then analyze your purpose into greater details, and then develop an audience profile. So last time we talked about a very important concept in business communication, which is the you viewpoint. Anyone remember what is you viewpoint? Basically, I think the name says it all, right? You viewpoint is what? I'm waiting for your answers in the comment chat box. Because when you understand the you viewpoint, then you will know why we should do all these steps in the planning stage, and also how we should do them. Okay, so here we're talking about analyzing the situation should consist of defining your purpose, analyzing your purpose, and developing an audience profile. So we have some comments here already. So Ian said that your viewpoint is let yourself in the situation of the receiver to understand their feeling. Yeah, that is a good point. Put you into others' positions as well. Yeah. Anything else? Anything else? So last time we talked about a very important point of, okay, you put yourself in the position of others, but you also want to emphasize what? Yeah, here Ling Chi said that we should understand, respect, and meet the need of the audience. But we also want to emphasize the interest and the benefits, right? Remember, we want to emphasize the benefits for the audience as well. When you know how to apply the you viewpoint, then you will know why we should define your purpose. So your purpose may be different in different situations, maybe to inform the audience, to persuade them to do something, or to collaborate with them on a mutual project or mutual task. Uh, After the general purpose, you may have some more specific purpose. For example, what in particular do you want to accomplish, what you want the audience will do, or what you want the audience will think. uh, After you define your purpose, then you put it into smaller points so that you make sure you cover all the points. For example, will anything change as a result of your message? For example, the way the audience think about, let's say, COVID virus, or is your purpose realistic or out of um, or not really feasible for this type of audience? Is the time right? Is your purpose acceptable to your organization? And for me, one particularly important part in analyzing the situation is to analyze your audience or develop an audience profile. So to put it easier for you to understand, I already put some questions here. First, to understand your audience, you need to answer the who question. So the who here may relate to demographic factors like their sex, female or male, the age, occupation or income. Then we move to the next question of what they want, what they care about, what they like. I'm talking about buying behavior, preferences, thinking pattern, culture. uh, Another important point is why. Why will they? What? Why the audience will do what you want them to do, or think what you want them to think? This starts with their pain points. Do you understand? And are you familiar with the term pain points? So, for example, let's take the example of you being a marketer for a brand. For example, let's say BTS, for example. Okay, so you want what when you write a message on your Facebook fan page, your message may have the purpose of persuading the customer to buy your products, right? And in order to persuade them to buy your products, you may need to understand their pain points, what causes problems or challenges for them. And then you try to solve that problem, solve that pain points for the audience. If you successfully can solve the pain points for the audience or the customers, there will be high chance that they will buy your products. Okay, so in why here, we also mention about needs, their needs, the audience needs, their interests or their benefits. And in to understand the audience, you may also want to ask where they are, their location, when they will receive your message, and how they will receive your message. So, for example, if you think that your audience will read your message on a printed magazine, it will be very different from they reading your message on a mobile device, right? So, for example, when they read your message on a mobile device, how should you change the message to match with the audience? Okay, compared with when the audience read your message on a printed paper or printed magazine or printed newspaper, but now they read your message on a mobile device. So how will you change, and how will you adapt your message to fit with the audience? I'm waiting for your comment on the chat box about your ideas on how you will change your message. Okay. So here we are analyzing the situation. The situation is that your audience will read the message on a mobile device, which is a very popular thing today, right? Most of the time we read a lot of things on our mobile phones. So as a communicator, as a person who writes the message, how will you make it different so the audience can easier read your message? Any idea? Okay, please comment your idea on the chat box. Okay, so thank you, Ling Dung Thao, right? So you're talking about visualizing the message, which is a very interesting point. How will you visualize the message? Printed paper, yeah. Attracting words, impressive title, yeah. Really good points. Aid visual aids, animations, make it shorter in a nice card. Okay. All right. Okay, so the main points I can capture from your ideas here is that make it shorter. I totally agree with that. On a mobile device, you cannot persuade the audience with very long text because they will lose their attention and have some distraction right away, right? Uh, and I also like your ideas of visualizing and using visual aids for the message, but I want you to give me some examples of how you will visualize your message, adding visual aids to the message. Okay, so yeah, so I think you got the point about analyzing the situation, analyzing your audience, and then adapting the message to fit with the audience already. So let's move to the next point. Uh, the next step in planning stage is gathering information. You may have many different ways to gather the information. Okay, so for example, you want to write, let's say, a cover letter to apply for a job. Okay, so you will definitely need to gather some information. So can you tell me how you can gather the information so that you can write your cover letter in an effective way? Okay, so I'm waiting for your comment now. How you can gather information to write your cover letter? Okay, so there are many ways to gather information for your writing, but you need to make sure that the information needs to be accurate, ethical, and relevant. Okay, so again, how can you gather information to write your cover letter? You're going to practice writing your cover letter, I think, in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, so we already have the comment from Ling is that we need to read the job description carefully. Okay, we can also gather information by arrange in with time. I don't really understand your point, Hang. Can you explain it a little bit more? And Zoom added the idea that we should search for cover letters form. Yeah, exactly. Uh, arrange information in turn. So you mean that we need to arrange the information logically, right? Through talking and stalking them on Facebook and asking around. Uh, okay, so a lot of interesting ideas here. So again, we have many different ways of gathering the information, and based on each situation, we may be very creative in finding different means to gather the information. But again, yeah, thank you all for your comments. Again, you need to make sure that the information is accurate, ethical, and relevant. Moving to the next point. Uh, After gathering the information, we will choose the medium and channel that is most appropriate for our message and for our audience. So in table 4.1 in the textbook, you can read in details about different medium, and channel with their advantages and disadvantages. So here they are breaking the medium channels into 6 different types. The first one is oral, in person. The second one is oral, digital. The third one is written, printed. The fourth one is written, digital, and visual, printed, visual, digital. So you can see that most of the time, half of it are already in digital forms. And as we all know, digital forms is become much more popular these days. And in each here, they already listed the advantages and disadvantages of it. So, for example, if you convey the message orally, in person, face to face with the person, what are the advantages here? Firstly, it will provide opportunity for immediate feedback. So for example, if the receiver don't really understand your point or want you to clarify on some details in the message, they can ask you directly and immediately, right? Uh, you can also easily resolve misunderstandings and negotiate meanings. So as we just said, if anything that may cause misunderstanding, we have more opportunities to resolve it right away. And it also involves rich nonverbal cues. So for example, you can look at the facial expressions, the eye contact, the body posture and hand gestures to understand what is not said, right? Which is the nonverbal cues. Uh, but on the other hand, the oral in-person channel has also some limitations. For example, it will provide no permanent and verifiable record of the communication. So, for example, you and your boyfriend had some fight last week, and you agreed on something, but then this week you reminded him, and he said that no, I didn't say that, but you have no record of the communication if it is just in oral and in-person form. Okay, so you can read more in more details about all these medium and channel in table 4.1 in the textbook. Okay, so let's move to the next point. After we gather the information and we choose the channel, now we will organize the information. So the basic principle for organizing the information may be very familiar with you already. We define our main idea, we limit our scope, uh, we also want to choose between direct or indirect approaches. So this is one point that we will go in further later. And we outline our content easily by just following the basic principle of having the main idea first, then the major points and examples and evidences. Okay, so now coming back to the approach, direct and indirect approach. Does the name tell you the way we will use each approach? If we use the direct approach, what will happen? And if we use the indirect approach, what will be different? And do you think that Vietnamese people usually use the direct or indirect approach? Okay, I'm waiting for your comment. Okay, so Hiền commented that Vietnamese people usually use the indirect approach, right? But what does it mean? What does it mean by indirect? And what is the difference between direct and indirect approach? Okay, so everyone thinks that we kind of use indirect approach more, right? I think we use both. Okay, thank you, Ha, for your idea. But what is the difference? What is direct and indirect? So if we use the direct approach, where should the main idea be? Where will we place the main idea? Is it at the beginning or at the end? Yeah, in the opening, right? At the very beginning, we go directly into the main point, right? Which is different from the indirect approach. The indirect approach, we may put it maybe in the middle or at the end, right? Okay. And where when should we use the direct approach and when should we use the indirect approach? In what situation is direct approach a more appropriate one than indirect? And in which situation is indirect approach more appropriate than direct one? So let's say, for example, you work in the human resource department of a company, and you are informing candidates about their interview results. Okay, so yeah, and if you congratulate someone on their job offer and welcoming them to the company, will you use the direct or indirect approach? Yeah, direct, right? But if you're informing a candidate that we are sorry, we will not hire you, right? You are not good enough, something like that. Maybe the indirect approach might be easier for them to get the message and accept the message, right? Okay, so here in the textbook, they provide us with a figure classifying different situations and different criteria for choosing between direct and indirect approach. Here they are having four different criteria. The first one is the audience reaction, then the message opening. Uh, they are using the audience reaction as the criteria for choosing either direct approach or indirect approach. So here they put the audience reaction into a continuum, starting with unwilling, then uninterested, then displeased. Okay, so in these situations, when the audience is unwilling, uninterested, or displeased, it is advised that you would use the indirect approach. But if they are neutral, pleased, interested, or even eager to hear the message, then you should use the direct approach. Okay, and then they also give you some instructions on how to write the direct approach and then the indirect approach. Okay, later in the next lecture, we will learn in details about how to write these two approaches. Okay. Uh, Moving on, this table 4.3, is one table that I find really useful. This talks about 6 types of detail. So coming back to outlining your content here, okay, you always start with the main idea, then measure points, then examples and evidences. But many students have difficulty with finding the right type of examples and evidence to include in your writing. So this can be a suggestion for you in order to develop your details part by giving examples or illustrations. So here they give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 types of detail that you can include in your writing. For example, facts and figures, example, illustration, description, a story that you're telling, reference to authority or visual aids. Okay, so I want you to have a closer look at home at these types of detail. So in later exercise, when you practice writing, you will find it easier to develop your ideas. Okay. Okay, so we finished with the first part of the writing process, which is planning, right? So again, in planning, we already covered 4 main points: how to analyze the situation, right? Remember, defining your purpose, analyze your purpose, and analyze your audience. How to gather the information. We want to make sure that the information is accurate, ethical, and relevant. How to choose medium and channel amongst the 6 types, and how to organize the information. Okay, so now we will move on to the second stage of the writing process, which is the actual writing. So in the actual writing here, we will focus on 2 main points: how to adapt to your audience and how to compose the message. Okay. Uh, okay, so how to adapt to your audience. Uh, if you already understand your audience really well, so I think you wouldn't have any problem in adapting to your audience, because you know what they like, right? What they prefer, what type of writing style they will easily read and understand. So here is just a soft reminder that you need to be sensitive to the audience needs by using the you viewpoint, by emphasizing the positive side of the problem. Okay, so emphasizing the positive side of the issue or even the problem is not an easy thing, especially when you are writing a negative message, right? Informing them a bad news, something they don't want to hear. So how can you still emphasize the positive side in those situations? Any idea? So again, in negative situations where we need to inform them bad news, for example, or something they don't want to hear, right? How can we still emphasize the positive? What kind of positive can we still provide in our writing? I know that it is not easy at all, right? But any idea about that? Okay, so thank you for all your comments here. Yeah, so I really like the point of we show our sympathy. You mean empathy, right? Or encouragement, Zoom? Yeah, yeah, okay. So a lot of different ideas on how to show, oh, okay, how to show the positive sign, even in negative situations. Uh, okay, all right, I see. So later in writing negative message, we will talk more about that. But one particular point we can write is anything else that you can do for the receiver. Okay, so for example, in a writing that is informing the workers, like thousands of workers in a big factory, that they will be fired because of downsizing efforts of the company. Okay, you know, thousands of jobs will be lost. So how can we provide some alternative solution for those workers? In the next lecture, we will come to that example, but it is not an easy thing for them, right? So emphasizing the positive here may mean that we should try to arrange, for example, with our partners or even our competitors who are in need of more labor, that we may place them, help them to submit their CV, cover letters, and apply for jobs in other competitors or suppliers or our partners, which is a solution that may help them to solve their own challenge, right? So that is an example of how to emphasizing the positive uh, in your writing. Then the next point is to build strong relationships. And one way to build strong relationships is first to establish your credibility, to make the audience believe in you. Okay, So for example, you are writing a Facebook post, right? And then you run advertisement for that Facebook post. To most of the audience that are getting the advertisement, you are a totally stranger, right? And how can you make them believe in you? How can you establish your credibility in your writing so that they will believe in you and they will continue to read what you wrote, and they may take some action that you want them to take, right? Because first, if you don't believe, you don't trust someone, you will not bother what they are telling you. Okay. So again, my question here is that how can you establish your credibility with a group of audience that may not know you? Okay, we can show our commitment in the performance. How can we show our commitment in the performance? I'm a little bit confused here. Can you explain a little bit more, Zoom? Anyone else? Anyone has some idea about how to establish your credibility? Mm-hmm. Okay, follow the trend to be relatable. Okay, give a figure from official sources, provide evidence with the content. Okay, use evidence that they find credible. Okay, so all these points are really valid in founding and establishing your credibility with the audience. And yeah, so most of them are based on evidence, right? So for example, if I'm selling something, what kind of evidence can be persuasive to the audience? Hmm? If you're selling something, okay, you want to persuade them, right? What kind of evidence? Okay, number of sales, really good. Feedback from customers, yes. Customer testimonials, right? Chats and graphs, yeah, really good points. Anything else? Product quality, how can they know product quality? The benefit they will get, yeah. Benefits, yeah. Benefits is a good point, but here I'm talking about particular, like very specific evidence. So I think the point of charts, figures, charts and graphs, number of sales and feedback from customers are very good types of evidence. Price is not an evidence, not really an evidence. How durable the products are, yeah. The speaker's experience about the products compared with others, reliable research. Another thing that most and many companies are using nowadays is KOL, right? You understand KOL? What does it mean? Yeah. What does KOL mean? Famous people, but what does it stand for? Yeah. KOL. Key opinion leader. Yeah, key opinion leader. Yeah, that's right. So key opinion leader basically are famous people, right? Like celebrities, sport stars, or yeah, or influencer, key influencers as well. So it's just different needs. So KOLs is also another way companies are using as an evidence of the quality of the product, though it is quite adaptable, right? Okay, so the next point after building strong relationships is to control your style and tone to be suitable for that group of audience. So here it is suggested that you should use a conversational tone. What does it mean? A conversational tone. What does it mean? Yeah, so you talk with them like a friend. Anything else? Yeah, casual talking. Yeah, you don't put things too serious, right? Anything else? What kind of language will you use? Plain language, right? Plain language means simple language, easy to understand, right? You don't use big words, you don't use too fancy words, right? So it's like when they are reading it, it's like you're talking with them, right? Like you have having a conversation with them. Okay. So another thing to consider is either to choose active voice or passive voice. Which one should you choose in which situation? Okay, in which situation should you choose the active voice, and in which one should you choose the passive voice? Can you tell me? So I believe we are all very familiar with passive voice and active voice, right, when writing. But in which situation? Active is informal and passive is more formal. Okay, that is Phương Anh's idea, right? Anyone else? Passive voice to provide customers benefits, active voice for positive situations, and passive voice for negative ones. Okay, because you don't want them to blame anyone, right? Ling? Okay, anyone else? Any other idea? Okay, so let's have a look at the recommendation from the textbook. The textbook here says that using active voice and passive voice depends on some factors. So in general, you don't want to use passive voice because it will because using active voice will make your writing more lively and direct. Okay. However, passive voice is helpful when you need to be diplomatic. Okay. So, for example, your partner has caused some mistakes or errors that is unacceptable, but you don't want to blame them. You still want to keep the relationship. Then you may use the passive voice. Okay. Or when you want to focus the attention on the problems or solutions rather on people. Okay, so here they give some examples like you lost the shipment. So if you use the active voice like that, it's like really blaming the person. But then when you put it like the shipment was lost, it focus more on the problem, not the person. Okay. Or we are investigating the high rate of failures on the final assembly line. Uh, it makes the problem much more serious. But if you put it in the passive voice, like the high rate of failures is being investigated, it's focusing more on the action, not the person. Okay. Uh, the second step in writing is composing the message, writing the message. So composing the message will depend on three levels. First one, choosing powerful words, right? Then forming effective sentences. And last one is to write coherent paragraphs. Any piece of writing is based on these three levels: powerful words, then effective sentences, then coherent paragraphs. Then when we put it all together, it will make a good writing. So some suggestions for you to choose the powerful words. That first, they need to be correct. Then they need to be effective, telling the audience what you want to tell. There should be a balance between the concrete and abstract words. You don't want to have too abstract words because it may be difficult for the audience to follow. You should use strong, precise, and familiar words. You don't use too strange or too fancy words, because audience may find it hard to understand. You use the jargon, the technical terms really carefully to make sure that the audience still can understand it. And if you use the jargon, maybe it might be helpful if you provide some explanation as well. Okay. Then coming to the effective sentences, we all know that we have four types of sentence: simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. Okay. But one thing that you should keep in mind is that we should use a flexible mixture of these sentence types. Using all simple sentences may make the writing really boring, right? But using all compound, complex sentences may make it really complicated, right? And the audience may find it difficult to follow your thoughts. And last one, to write coherent paragraphs, we should still follow the basic form if we are beginners. Okay, if when you are really good at writing and you become advanced writers already, you may find different ways to form the paragraphs. But for now, please follow the advice of forming a paragraph that consists of topic sentence and then supporting sentences. Okay, and also using the transitions like connecting words, linking words, using pronouns that refer to previous part of the sentence in a correct way. Okay, and there are five types of paragraphs that you may uh, use in your writing, like illustration. Okay, you place a main idea and then you illustrate it. Okay, giving examples for it. Compare, contrast, cause, effect. You list out the reasons and then the consequences of a problem. Then classification, firstly, secondly, thirdly, and then problem solution. Okay, any question relating to the writing part? Okay, before we come into the completing part. Any question about planning and writing stage of the writing process? Okay, so should you have any question, please comment. Okay, I will come back to your questions at the end of the lecture, or I will reply directly to you later. Okay, so now let's move to completing stage. The completing stage of the writing process will consist of four steps: revising the message, producing the message, proofread the message, and distributing the message. Okay, uh, in revising the message, the first thing we do is evaluating the first draft, the first manuscript of the writing. Here are the questions you should ask yourself as a checklist when you evaluate the first draft. For example, is the information accurate, relevant to the audience? Is there enough information, or just very basic information and it may not satisfy the reader's needs? Good balance between general and specific information. Okay, then you also need to review the organization of the ideas. For example, are all the points covered in the most logical order? So I find this point really a problem for many students. So they have a lot of good points, but the way they organize all the points are not logical at all. Okay, so you should always ask yourself, is there any better way, any more logical way to place and sequence the ideas in this writing? Okay, uh, do the most important ideas receive the most space, and are they placed in the most important positions as well? Okay, and all the questions here are like a checklist, so you can have a look and think about them before completing your message. Okay, then in some situations you may be asked to evaluate and revise the works of others. In those cases, there is another list of questions, but something you should need to keep in mind is that your job is to help the writer, your friend, your colleague, your partner to succeed, not to force them to impose your writing style. Okay, and make sure that any point you want to suggest or make changes to, you already understand the writer's intention, because maybe the writer's intention is totally different from what you are suggesting the changes for. Yeah. Okay, another step in revising is to make sure that the writing is readable. Okay, to improve the readability, think about 4 points here. The sentence length should be varied. Okay, so we talk about the sentence structure, sentence types. It should be a combination of simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. And the sentence length should also be varied. Some short sentences, then some middle, then some long. Okay. Overall, the paragraph should be short. We don't want a paragraph that covers the whole page, because it may be very difficult for the reader to follow. Okay. In some parts, you may want to use the list to clarify and emphasize, rather than just writing everything down. Please use the list to make it clearer. Okay. And you also want to add headings and subheadings when appropriate. Okay. The next step in completing is to edit for clarity and conciseness. In this part, I want you to read more at home and focusing on the points I already put on the slides here. Okay. Uh, Another part you need to self-study is about producing the message. These parts talk about how to design the message in a reader-friendly way. Okay, so for example, 1 second. So for example, you want to produce the design of the message to make sure that they are consistent. There is a balance of different images and text, and every detail should be, for example, the margins of the. Okay, so about your question, Ngân-Hà, right? So this part of the lecture is related to chapter 6. Okay, so all the completing part here is in chapter 6. And for the parts I asked you to self-study, you can easily find these parts in chapter 6. It follows consistently with the textbook. Okay, so these points I need you to read more at home, because we also don't have enough time for every point. So last point about completing the message is about proofreading your message to make sure that no small mistakes or errors is still there. Okay, so here we have 3 parts. For example, looking for writing errors like typos, misspelled words, grammatical errors, punctuation mistakes. So one tool that you may consider using to make sure that you don't make these mistakes is a website called Grammarly. Okay, so if you download or upload your document onto Grammarly, it will show you what kind of errors, like a spelling mistake, grammar mistake, or punctuation mistake is there in your writing, and also suggestion for correcting them. Okay, so really useful tool for you. Then you may want to look for missing elements, like anything missing, like the text sections, the exhibits, the notes or copyright notices, or other reference items. And then design, formatting, and programming mistakes. And last point about completing the message is about distributing the message. There may be different ways to distribute the message. So for example, if you work in a company and you want to distribute the message about a promotion program, let's say you're working for a spa, okay, a beauty spa, and you want to distribute the message about a promotion program of the spa. Okay, what means will you use to distribute the message? Okay, again, my question is, for example, if you are working in a beauty salon or beauty spa, okay, and the spa is having a promotion package, a promotion program for customers, what distribution means will you use to distribute the message to the audience? Okay, I'm waiting for your comment. Any idea? No idea at all? Again, my question is, what means will you use to distribute the message? Okay, let me take some examples. To distribute the message about the promotion package, you may distribute it on Facebook, right? Or print the leaflets to distribute the message. Okay, yeah, and here we can also suggest that using the shop sign, you put a really big poster in front of your shop, so everyone passing by can see it, and maybe there will be some customers coming in, right? Yeah, so Facebook ads, posters, leaflets, okay, brochure, catalogs, and many different ways to distribute the message. Okay, but normally when considering which means to distribute the message, there are some factors that we need to consider, including the cost, right? Producing thousands of leaflets is really an expensive thing, right? Or producing catalogs or posters also costs a lot of money. And then is it convenience? How long does it take? And is there any security and privacy issue related to distributing the message? Okay, so for example, if you are given a very confidential message and you need to send the message to someone else, okay, then you may need to consider very carefully about what means you will distribute the message to make sure that the message still stays confidential, okay, and private. All right. So again, in this lecture, we already covered the 3 steps in the writing process: planning, writing, and completing. Okay, so due to the limits of time, there are some points that I don't really I didn't have the chance to go into details, and I suggest you to read more about those parts at home. Okay, if you have any question about this lecture, you can comment right now and I will answer your questions. Again, this lecture is the content of 3 chapters in the textbook, chapter 4, 5, and 6. So there are a lot of more detailed description of each part that you can refer to the textbook. And if there is anything not clear in the textbook, you can post on Google Classroom, so myself or your tutors can help you.